Hello, fellow foodies, and welcome back. This is Dr. Cassandra Quave, and you're listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious. This week on the show, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Gina Kennedy. Gina is the Director of Research, Translation, and Impact for the Periodic Table of Food Initiative and Principal Scientist with the Alliance of Bioversity and CIAT. Gina leads the development and implementation of PTFI's research and translation strategy and works closely with the Centers of Excellence and other research partners to implement, translate, and disseminate research findings that advance scientific understanding and use of food composition data. Gina is passionate about food biodiversity and the role that food biodiversity can play in creating healthier food systems that nurture both people and the planet. So, thanks so much, Gina, for coming on this show. It's really great to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks, Cassandra. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, I thought we might dive into one of the questions that's been on my mind, and that's about diet diversity. Maybe we could start with the basics. Like, what is diet diversity? Why is it important? And how does that link to food biodiversity?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's definitely at the heart of all of my research is thinking about diversity. So just to start off with, diversity is such a fundamental concept that is really instills benefits for so many aspects of both human health, but also ecosystem health and functioning. So
Mhm.
diversity is just this fundamental tenet for ecosystems and landscapes, but also for agriculture. And then, now as we're learning more and more for the health of our soils, we need to have a very healthy soil microbiome to nourish our plants and then the pollinator effects. And so diversity is so important to many systems, but also, of course, food systems and diets, which is my area. As a public health nutrition specialist, I specialize in food systems and diets. So it
Mhm.
kind of just goes to that fundamental principle of don't put your eggs all in one basket, and the idea that diversity is so important and it's so important for so many facets. But in particular, dietary diversity. So in a very simple way is like eating a diverse array of foods. And then, of course, as a nutritionist or public health nutrition specialist, we would have qualifications about we're not talking about a diversity of, say, ultra processed foods, but of foods that, say, World Health Organization would recommend for a healthy diet. So eating a diversity of those foods is a fundamental concept in nutrition, and it's present in almost all food-based dietary guidelines. So it's one of those things that's really fundamental.
That's great. So, when you think of food diversity, are you thinking about things in different food groups, or what does that mean? Are we talking about different types of grains, or is it a mixture of grains and legumes, or meat or dairy? Like, how is that all categorized?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in food-based dietary guidelines, it's mostly categorized, always categorized based on food groups. So we have these principal food groups. There's five that come up in almost all food-based dietary guidelines, and that's starchy staples, vegetables, fruits, um, pulses, nuts and seeds, and animal source foods. So those food groups, and then when I talk about food biodiversity, I mean a couple different things, right? I mean the diversity that we could have in any of those five food groups. So we could have many diverse grains, and from all over cultures and traditions. Have fonio, teff, the ones that we're so familiar with, rice, wheat, maize, but barleys and millets. And you could
Mm,
take any food group and kind of keep going, like all the rich edible biodiversity that we have. And then the actual definition that we use, and it goes according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, is food biodiversity is actually looking even one level down below species to the variety, cultivar, or breed. So you can think, for example, if you're shopping in the supermarket and shopping for apples, we have a great selection of apples, many different cultivars, a
mhm.
variety of apples that you could select from. And amazingly enough, the world is full of these cultivars and varieties. We just don't think about them and we haven't really explored them. So that's what food diversity, food biodiversity is.
That's amazing. No, I was that was the question I was going to go to next is like, are varieties included in that? Because I think we only see a small sliver of the diversity of foods when we think about, well, even apples. I mean, in the store, maybe most stores you have what, maybe 5 different types of apples, but in reality, there are hundreds, if not more, I would guess, of different apple varieties, and so that's great. So looking into that diversity. Um, what can you tell us about the Periodic Table of Food Initiative, the PTFI's work on food biodiversity, and kind of what's the underlying mission to what you're doing as this relates to biodiversity?
Yeah, so that is really what's central to the Periodic Table of Food Initiative is our work on food biodiversity. So we start off with three sort of overarching research questions. One is what is in food, and the second is what are the different how does what's in food vary based on how the food was grown or the climate conditions or different drivers that we know impact food quality and nutrient composition of foods. And then the third question is, what are the implications of this for people and planet? And so we have made a very nice paper. It was published in Nature Foods in 2024, and it really kind of it lists the aspiration that the Periodic Table of Food Initiative has for looking at food biodiversity. So it lists 1,650 foods that were nominated by regional experts. And what's just, I think, super fascinating about the list, it's an indicative list, an inspirational list. It's got plant foods and animal source foods. It has fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, beans and pulses, but also land animals and aquatic animals, and also
Mhm.
other aquatic vegetables like seaweeds. Um, and what's super interesting about it is a lot of what's on this list of 1,650 foods is not really reported currently in any food composition tables, and not even reported by the Food and Agriculture Organization. So there's just really just this whole world to explore. What actually is what types what's in our food, and what is the food that we're eating. We really don't know that much about it, which is amazing in 2024.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really great because, I think that you're also capturing some of these regional differences in foods. When we think of food, we think of very few species that are actually in industrial ag trade, right? That you see in stores. But the reality is, people all around the world, in different regions of the world, are eating these, diverse varieties and diverse species that we just don't see in the store. When I think about, well, even North America, historically, I mean, 2 of the foods that come to mind that once were huge sources of food would be the American chestnut and the pawpaw fruit. These are things that we just well, the pawpaw is difficult to ship because it, doesn't last long on store shelves. And the American chestnut was wiped out by blight. But I wonder how many other stories are like that. How many regional foods are out there that just we are not as aware of because they're either no longer as prevalent in the environment or no longer or aren't really suitable for trade.
Yeah, that's a perfect reflection, Cassandra. And it's so interesting that you bring up those two foods because I have a chestnut tree and my neighbor has a chestnut tree,
Yeah.
and so we do have chestnuts in our backyard. But also, you mentioned the pawpaw. So in this region where I live in the Northern Virginia region, we also used to have pawpaw growing, and because of my curiosity, I went to a special festival organized just for the pawpaw.
Oh,
So,
fun.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know, super fun. So it's interesting that we think that these foods, and they are definitely not part of our modern food system anymore, but we think that they've been completely forgotten. But actually, there are some people who are really passionate about still reviving them and still keeping them going. So there's all kinds of um, food fairs and cultural awareness, if you are interested in it, that you can seek out. And so, as a matter of fact, I got some pawpaw seeds. No, I haven't yet tried to plant them, but it's just a matter of having having the intention and being,
Yeah.
you know. But to your point, there are thousands of foods. I think it's 30,000 edible species on the planet, and also to your point, it's just tragic that about 60% of our caloric intake is on the planet right now comes from rice, wheat, and maize. And we know that that is really so dangerous for our agriculture systems and our ecosystems. But we also know that, we're not a really super well nourished. We're not thriving based on eating, so much of just a very narrow range of species.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's kind of incredible when there's many species to choose from. There's so much choice. We generally like
Well,
more choice.
yeah, and it's funny because when I think about the inner aisles of the grocery store, I feel like we're tricked into this illusion of diversity because I think as humans, we are naturally attracted to diversity in our food system. No one likes to eat the same meal over and over every single day. You might have a rotation where you go through certain recipes every week or every month, but um, in general, I think we have this natural desire for different things. And when you look at those inner aisles of the store, it looks like it's different things, but in reality, it's not. I mean, it's like you said, it's a very, very small number of crops that are going to creating many of these products.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, like being somebody who studies this from an international perspective, it really does depend on the type of grocery store you're going to
Good
and where
point.
you're where
Very
you
good.
are when you're going to the grocery store.
Mhm.
So happily in a lot of Asian cultures and even luckily in this area in Northern Virginia, we have some really amazing Asian markets and the
Mhm.
diversity of fruits and vegetables there and mushrooms and is extremely noticeable. Like, you wouldn't find that diversity of fruits and vegetables and mushrooms in, your standard American grocery store. But, the world's a big place, and the United States has a lot, I think, that we can learn from other cultures and how, different cultures and different traditions preserve their traditional foods and their food ways. And I guess, like, also to your point, about yeah, who would want to eat rice every single day or corn? I mean, maize every single day, and yet people do. And then,
Mhm.
if you've done that ever since you were a child, and that's what you get used to, there are, a lot of cultures that say, we do dietary intake surveys, and you ask, have you eaten? Like, what have you eaten? And if they haven't eaten their favorite staple food, they'll be kind of like, well, I didn't really get to eat yesterday and I only had this or that or the other thing because they didn't have their favorite staple food. But I think that's just an evolution of becoming like not very curious and not and so but I do feel like the pendulum is swinging that we're becoming much more curious and also with the help of some partners like we have I'd love to talk about our centers of excellence, but we also have PTFI ambassadors who are chefs. You had Robert Oliver from the Pacific Island Food Revolution on your program. So
Yes.
these inspirational people really help us take it out of the, help give it the spark and give life to it and make
Yeah.
it more exciting to kind of break out of your box and eat new things or things that your probably grandmother prepared for you that you've sort of forgotten about. Like, I
Yeah.
remember my grandmother made rhubarb all the time, and,
Mhm.
I don't think I've had a dish with rhubarb in it maybe once or twice since I was perhaps 10 years old. So, it's interesting.
No, it's such a good point though. Yeah, when things kind of come in and out of popularity, and I love Chef Oliver's work on reclaiming these incredible local recipes and culinary traditions of the Pacific Islands and yeah, doing exactly that, making them exciting and popular and things that, gets people's curiosity piqued. I think that's really cool. Um, and it kind of goes in line with, sustainable approaches to food production when you're working with like local native plants and food systems. Let's talk a little bit more globally about the PTFI. You mentioned these global centers for excellence. Where are these based and kind of what's their underlying mission?
Yeah, I'm so honored to be part of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative and working with our centers of excellence. They are truly amazing. And it's an important aspect of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. And I know you've had others from the Periodic Table of Food Initiative talking, for example, Tracy Shalfazada, who spoke
Hmm.
about foodomics. And so it's just really amazing to be able to work with the centers of excellence. So where they are geographically is we have a center of excellence in Ethiopia, in Ghana, in Fiji, in Australia, in Thailand, in Colombia, in Mexico, in the United States, and in the Netherlands. And what they have done is they apply to be part of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative. And their mission is to onboard Periodic Table of Food Initiative tools. So these are standardized tools and omics platforms, which I will let the readers or listeners go back to Tracy Shalfazada because she is very articulate on what is foodomics, much more than I would be. So they have onboarded these platforms. So they are looking at metabolomics, which is all the small biomolecules in food, or ionomics, which is this very interesting platform of 26 minerals and metals, fatty acids. Tracy describes that really well in her podcast, and so on and so forth. So a very deep dive and going deeper than we normally go in a food composition table. So they signed up to do that, to say, yes, we want to explore our foods in this way. And so they're onboarding these standardized tools. And then in reference back to the inspirational food list, they either contributed their ideas to the food list, and now also they're looking at government priorities, looking at initiatives that are happening, like the Vision for Adaptive Crops and Soils, and they're refining their food list, and they're making the list of foods that they themselves is a country priority for them. Like, you'll appreciate this. Our colleagues at the Ethiopian Public Health Institute in Ethiopia, they want to look at insect. They want to look
Uh
at
huh.
insect. They want to look at moringa, and they're very interested in honey also. So each of them has their own flavor of what they're trying to look at. So they're making their list of foods. And then another, like two other things that I'll say. One is we have to be very careful with access and benefit sharing and due diligence in that regard. And so they are consulting with their, if need be, they're consulting with their national biodiversity experts if they're taking a crop that's quite indigenous or native. A lot of our research institutions, their governments. For example, in Thailand, the government says, you're a research institute. We rely on you to generate this type of data. We're very happy for you to do this. In others, it's just much more of a negotiation. And then, of course, if we are, in some cases, taking samples directly from a farmer, then we need to get their free prior informed consent. So we work on that aspect as well. And then the other aspect that's very interesting is what we call our metadata. And it's also very unique. And the centers all signed up to do all these things. So they signed up to not just take my apple and take it to the lab and analyze it. And here you go. Here's the data. And it can be open access under Creative Commons license. But they also agreed to take as much information as they could. We call it metadata in a standardized way. So going back to edible biodiversity, they're looking at the cultivar variety or breed of what they're analyzing. They're giving us some data about the latitude or longitude, or at least, if it was from a supermarket, where exactly in, Colorado was this picked up, or Indiana was it picked up. So it's being much more precise about the, sort of true origins of that food specimen. And then we hope that over time, it just will create this like very rich metadata that has never really before in a systematic way been combined with food composition data. So our centers of excellence are amazing. They're doing all that, and they're just fantastic. They're just fabulous. It gives me energy every day to get up and do my job. And then we also we're bringing on new laboratories as well. So we have different partnerships, like for example, with the National Institute of Nutrition in India and the Chinese Agriculture Academic CAS, Chinese Academic Academy for Agriculture Sciences, sorry. And in Japan, we're working with Nauru and many others. I can't mention them all. We're building our global ecosystem.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So, within these centers of excellence, I'm assuming also there are opportunities for them to share findings, collaborate, network. Are you finding that this is also helping build research infrastructure across this network?
Yeah, absolutely. They're very interested in collaborating with each other. It's been really amazing. Um, I don't want to refer to every single of your podcasts with the Periodic Table of Food Initiative, but there's another podcast where Jackie Bertoldo and Kevin Cody
Yes.
talk about PTFI's capacity strengthening efforts. So through Food EDU and also through
Hmm.
Good Food Fellows. So I'm bringing that up because Good Food Fellows are having opportunities to go and visit other centers of excellence. So having like cross exchanges and build their capacity by seeing a different lab. The same with our PIs of some of our centers of excellence. They've been able to see our Colorado State lab and interact with, the laboratory, the experts in these omics platforms and sort of really gain more knowledge with them. And then again, a lot of these centers of excellence are at academic institutions. So of course they're teaching students and they're, building students' capacity. So that's another super interesting aspect of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative is the capacity building efforts. And I'll just say also that the Periodic Table of Food Initiative is very intentional, as you can kind of tell by our global ecosystem of addressing asymmetries in access to technology and access to these types of omics techniques. And so it has been a very intentional process of making it the technologies democratized. So making sure that a lab in Fiji can also, can onboard an omics method using the equipment that they might have or that they could procure. We sometimes also um, are writing grants to get instrumentation to the laboratories or, build their capacity in many different ways. But one of them is infrastructure. But it's very important to not contribute to asymmetries in access to this technology. We want to be a very democratized project.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this is something I've noted a lot in terms of biodiversity of wild species is often some of our hotspots for terrestrial biodiversity are located in regions where there's very poor scientific infrastructure. Brilliant scientists, but they just don't always have access to some of these resources. This is great that there's an equity component here that we're really getting representation across the globe. That's really exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very nice.
Okay, and so now the goal of these different centers is they are looking at these 1,000 foods that you mentioned, right? And what's going to happen when that data is available, or what's the goal for that data?
Right. Well, it's a big knowledge sharing initiative. And the goal really is for this data to be taken up, by researchers and by others. It's like a power of the partnerships type of initiative. And we want people to access the data and come up with their own, you know, research questions and explore their own research questions about connections between edible food biodiversity and nutrition and health, and also connections back to agriculture and soil and landscapes and ecosystems. So it's the intention is very much for the data to be used to, support other researchers to generate even more information and more data and solutions, to some of
Yeah.
the big crises that we're facing, like the climate crisis and the diet related non communicable disease crisis, but also other nutritional problems that have been with us for centuries, like micronutrient deficiencies. So a lot of possibilities.
A lot to come out. No, I mean, that what I think is one of the things that has me most excited when I think about, even thinking about the terms of climate and environmental changes and micronutrient accumulation, how that can all differ, and your plant chemistry will differ place to place based on all of these different parameters. So I think getting that geographic data that you're collecting as well is going to be very important. That metadata will be very important in helping us understand how different growing conditions affect the chemistry of our foods, which then affects the nutritional value of our foods, and which in effect affects our health. So it's this great connection all the way down from us to the soil.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we do have a few very specific projects that look at those questions. So, for example, in Ethiopia and Ghana, funded by the Sea Rave Foundation, we have a project called, it's very ambitious, Soil Health, Food Composition, and Human Health. And that's actually taking samples of the soil and looking at it for soil minerals and metals, including heavy metals,
Hmm.
and then samples of the food that was grown in that soil and doing the same thing, looking at minerals and metals and other nutritional components, and taking dietary intakes, dietary histories from the farmers. It's smallholder farmers in Ethiopia and Ghana. So
Hmm.
more likelihood that they're eating the crops that they're growing. And of course, making sure that the crops that we're testing are some of the things that they're consuming. And then even taking it one step further to taking blood samples and stool samples. And we'll look at, there's some of their outcomes for nutrient deficiencies in blood, and also the microbiome, the gut microbiome. So it's a very
Wow.
interesting, yeah, it's really groundbreaking. And we're so excited that Ethiopia and Ghana are some of our first centers of excellence to try it. But yeah, so we're trying to explore some of those questions for sure.
I mean, I think that really encompasses the ethos of One Health. I mean, for so long, One Health, I think, has just been portrayed as animal health, veterinary health of livestock, and human health, when really One Health is it goes down to the soil. I mean, it really does. Um, I recently read a book, and we have a guest on the podcast coming up, Ferris Jaber, who wrote about kind of Earth as a living creature, and it really made me rethink about the importance of our soil microbiome and how that relates to how the Earth is terraformed and how each level of species kind of builds into the system. And I think having that kind of vertical view of health from the ground up is going to really provide a lot of really helpful information moving forward. That's
Yeah.
great.
Well, yeah, I know that you work in a very horizontal way and in a very multidisciplinary way, but I mean, for the grand challenges that we're facing, we need
Yeah.
multidisciplinary efforts. You can't just stay in your
Oh,
lane and just say, I work on diets. You have to just be able to figure out how to work with the soil scientists. And so
mhm.
these teams that I was talking about with the project, of course, they're many multidisciplinary partners, someone who's a soil expert, someone who's an agronomist, others who are can do the food sampling and laboratory analysis, then others that can do the dietary assessment, and then even others that can analyze the blood and the gut microbiome. So it's really fun.
That's great. That's great
Yeah.
to bring all those great minds together. Amazing. Well, what are you most excited about? We've talked a lot about a number of projects when it comes to the direction things are going with the Periodic Table of Food Initiative and our understanding of health and diet. I mean, are there particular um, aspects of this that really have made you optimistic for our future understanding of this field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna just say I'm really excited that I've worked at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and for since 2008, there's been an indicator that was part of an initiative for nutrition indicators for biodiversity, and that was so it's been a while, and the indicator was to measure food, not just at the level of species, but all the way down to the level of cultivar, variety, or breed, and do it in a comprehensive way. This was the idea in 2008. So I feel like finally there's an initiative that really is being serious about edible biodiversity and has a plan for how to, a plan to execute, and has the global infrastructure. So like I'm super excited because our colleagues in Thailand, they were just telling us on a call yesterday, they're going to analyze 100 insects that are
Mm.
consumed in Thailand. And they are very interested in the fatty acid composition because they want to know about the omega 3 and omega 6s. So that is like one small example, one of the centers, one food, one platform. So if you can imagine so many, building out centers and building out excitement. So what I am so excited about is like just getting people excited about the world's edible biodiversity, and then using that, of course, to improve our diets and our health, and also improve, our agricultural systems and our food production systems. And then I think the other thing that really makes me so proud about the Periodic Table of Food Initiative is doing so in a democratized way, in a way that
Yeah.
like brings a global community along rather than just elite scientists, who currently, like right now today, could do the technology. We're bringing everybody along in a democratized way. So those are the things that I really get me excited.
That's great. Well, yeah, I'm really happy you all are doing a little bit of work on entomophagy because it's such an interesting and I think very understudied aspect of nutrition. And, I always laugh when I think about people on the paleo diet. I always want to ask, well, are you eating insects? Because that's what we've been eating a lot more of historically.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's great. And this this inquiry into omega-3 to omega-6 ratios, I mean, that's so important as well. We are really off kilter right now with our processed foods and, way too many omega-6s in our diet right now. So that's great. Um, well, I guess my last question is really, are there other aspects of PTFI research that we haven't covered yet that you think that the audience would really like to know about? Or if you have any information on how the listeners might want to get involved in this research, or you know, how can they also learn more?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, the first way that a listener can just sort of learn more and get the feel, and the context is by visiting the website. So it's foodperiodictable.org, and you'll find a lot of information there. And then there are three specific ways I would say that listeners who are even more interested to get involved after looking at the website. So we have an open call for laboratories to apply to onboard PTFI's standardized multi-omics tools. You don't have to onboard them all. You select what you can do based on your capacity and instrumentation you have at your
Mhm.
laboratory. And so that can be accessed also by going to the website. And then the second way a listener can become involved is if you're a data person and you're like, I really want to use this data, or I want to use this data and combine it with some data that I have and see what research questions and see what I can generate based on using the data. And so the data is open access in two sites. One is Marker Lab. And again, all of this, you scroll through the website and you can find out where these are. So one is Marker Lab, and you just register and then your access is free. And the other is the American Heart Association Precision Medicine Platform. And the information as to how to access those sites is also available on the website. And then the third way is really if you're interested in the educational and capacity strengthening offerings of the Periodic Table of Food Initiative, you can go to Food EDU, and they can refer back to the podcast where you have Jackie Bertoldo and Kevin Cody. But also, a user can, if they want to look at the first three modules of Food EDU, they can sign up to review those modules and kind of start to become familiar with that educational offering. So there's many ways to become
Amazing.
involved, yeah, in PTFI.
That's amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much, Gina, for coming on the show. This has been really enlightening, and I'm really excited about the global energy going into this project.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. You've been listening to Foodie Pharmacology, the science podcast for the food curious, brought to you today on Squadcast. I want to thank our producers, Rob Cohen and Christine Roth, for their great job in bringing you this show each and every week. And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Stay healthy out there, and I'll see you next time. This Foodie Pharmacology podcast is part of a special series co designed with the Periodic Table of Food Initiative, also known as the PTFI. The views and opinions in this podcast are those of the presenters and represent the synthesis of science. The PTFI is a program of RF Catalytic Capital managed by a collaborative team at the American Heart Association and the Alliance of Bioversity, CIAT, that seeks to advance our fundamental understanding of food composition by providing tools, data, and training to scientists across the globe so they can better characterize the quality of the world's edible biodiversity. The PTFI's ultimate goal is to advance data driven solutions in the food sector for the health of people and the planet. Funding for the PTFI is provided by the Rockefeller Foundation, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, Rave Foundation, Fourfold Foundation, and Atria Health Collaborative.